The moment I began questioning this doctor during his pretrial deposition, I knew we had lost the case. You want to know what this is all about? Come join me for a walk through the neighborhood as I share with you exactly what this is all about. Hi, I'm Gerry Oginski, a New York medical malpractice and personal injury attorney. Okay, this was a medical malpractice case, and during the course of this lawsuit, I had an opportunity to question the doctor whom my client was suing. This was the doctor whom she believed caused her significant harm and injury. This was the doctor whom my medical expert determined violated the basic standards of medical care, causing my client significant harm and injury. During the course of this lawsuit, I had an opportunity to question this particular doctor in a process known as a pretrial deposition. For those of you who don't know, a deposition is an opportunity for me to ask questions of the doctor to learn about what he did and why, to learn about what treatment he rendered, to understand his knowledge of medicine and understand what his credentials and his qualifications were. All of this is critically important to establishing whether or not the doctor violated the basic standards of medical care. So now, here we are. It's been about a year since the lawsuit has been started. My client has already been questioned months earlier by the defense attorney in the same process, the pretrial deposition, which took place in our office. I am now going to the defense attorney's office to be able to question the doctor who is being sued. Now, this deposition can last for many hours. Sometimes it can last an entire day. I have certain questions and certain areas of interest that I have to cover with the doctor. I have to know that this doctor understands what the basic standards of medical care were. I have to understand whether this doctor is familiar with and knows the anatomy that we are talking about in this particular instance. I have to learn what the doctor's understanding and motivation was for the various treatments and methodologies that he used to treat my client. And there will be multiple times during this question and answer session where I will have to ask the doctor opinion questions about whether the treatment he rendered to my client violated the basic standards of medical care. Now you might be thinking, wait a second, is this doctor really going to go ahead and admit that he screwed up and violated the standard of care? The answer is of course not. But there are different strategies that I can use to get the doctor to acknowledge in certain hypothetical scenarios that if certain things were or were not done, then he would have to agree that those would violate the basic standards of medical care. Now, within the first few minutes of questioning the doctor, I knew in my mind that our case was done. I knew that it was over. And why did I know that? Because this doctor turned out to be the most sweet individual, one of the most sweet individuals I've ever encountered when I questioned a doctor in a medical malpractice case. This doctor was sincere, he was lovely, he was kind, he was polite. He had no bitter bone in his body. This doctor made every effort to do everything for my client, his patient, and it was clear that a jury would see this immediately. No matter what we were able to claim against this particular doctor, this jury, ultimately, if the case went to trial, would recognize that this doctor was the loveliest, sweetest, kindest gentleman that meant no harm whatsoever, no matter what he did, no matter what injuries my client suffered. This doctor's demeanor would overcome everything in this particular case. And that's how I knew that this case was over. No matter how many experts I had on my side, no matter what terrible injuries my client suffered, I knew that this doctor would generate such sympathy and empathy with any jury sitting on this case that no matter what we did and said, no matter how bad we claimed the doctor's actions were, that none of it would matter. Why? Because of how wonderful this guy was. This guy was a true Marcus Welby. And if you don't understand that reference, Marcus Welby in the good old days, back in the 50s, it was a TV show where this was a good, wholesome doctor, a general practitioner who would make house calls, who would do everything possible to do what's right for the patient no matter what. And that's exactly what this doctor was. Although I was able to establish and get the doctor to acknowledge what good medical practice required in this particular case, no matter what I asked the doctor to do, he was so polite, he was so kind, he turned around and explained to me in the nicest of ways why our theory was incorrect and why what he did was totally appropriate and well within the standard of care. And it was a remarkable insight into how a doctor's demeanor could alter and change the trajectory of a particular case, despite the fact that I had medical experts to confirm we had a meritorious case, despite the fact that my client was significantly injured. And I'll share something else with you that you probably have not heard yet. Prior to going into any deposition, a pretrial deposition where I'm going to question a doctor, I mentally prepare myself that this doctor is likely going to be defensive. He's going to reject all of our claims. He's going to be antagonistic. He could be nasty. And my feeling and my position when I question a doctor is that I am always polite until I'm not. Meaning that there have been times where doctors have turned around and started to push my buttons. They've started to argue with me about the wording of my questions. They start to play word games and semantics and claim not to understand what certain words mean. Meanwhile, these are very well-educated people, and they know exactly what it is I'm trying to ask. So I'll give you an example. Doctor, I want you to assume that Mrs. Jones came to you on this very first visit complaining of a lump in her breast, in her left breast, at the 12 o'clock position. Assuming that to be true, would you agree that good medical practice required that you take a detailed, thorough history? Well, it depends what you mean by detailed and thorough, counselor. Okay, so now this doctor knows exactly what I'm asking him, but now he's starting to play word games. And now I will clarify, but if the doctor continues to push my buttons and play word games, despite the fact that I'm asking simple questions, now I will start to push back. And I will start to become not aggressive, but assertive. And now I will ask leading questions requiring the doctor to answer yes or no. Many other times I'll ask open-ended questions. Doctor, tell me why you did this. Doctor, what do your notes reflect that the patient complained of? And now I can go ahead and use his notes to establish that he may not have recorded all the information that my client was telling him. Doctor, would you agree that if Mrs. Jones complained of a lump in her left breast, it would be critically important for you to record that, correct? Yes. That's a significant complaint. Is that true? Well, it depends what you mean by significant. I mean, there could be other complaints that I determine not to be significant. So that type of word game can go ahead and push me back, and now I'm going to go ahead and push back as well, and I'll get more assertive. And that is what I always steel myself beforehand for likely happening. But that didn't occur in this particular case that I'm describing for you. In this particular case, this doctor was so calm, he was so polite, he was so gentle. He was like a grandfather that loved being with you and loved being with kids and enjoyed life, and just everything about him was so wholesome and wonderful. And from that moment on, I knew it would be almost impossible to have a successful outcome in this case. So why do I share this with you? I share this with you because this does come up from time to time. Not often, but from time to time. And when it does happen, it becomes very challenging to go forward and say to my client, listen, we have a problem. And the problem is, yes, we have a valid case. Yes, our experts support that. But if we go to trial, we're going to have a very, very difficult time showing to a jury that this doctor caused you significant harm and injury, and that really he did it because he violated the basic standards of medical care. You know, I recognize you're likely watching this video because you want to see the beautiful beach. No, I realize you're watching this because you likely have questions or concerns about your own matter. Well, if your matter did happen in New York, and you have not yet started a lawsuit, but are thinking of doing so, and still have questions that need to be answered, what I invite you to do is pick up the phone and call me. You know I answer questions like yours every single day, and I'd love to chat with you. You can reach me at 516-487-8207 or by email at Gerry, Gerry, at Oginski-law.com. That's it for today's video. I'm Gerry Oginski. Have a wonderful day.